Hey guys, what is up? It is me, Gracie Davidson, back in the Spark studio for another episode of Community Chats. This time I got the honor to talk to Ryan Braden, a former UAH graduate, and he also works at Video Game Design Club. He opened my eyes on UAH's art school, video games, what it takes to make them, and all that's behind it, and just a good insight on the video game design industry. I really think y'all will enjoy this conversation. I surely have. Make sure you stick around to check it out. Hello, Ryan. Thank you for being in the Spark studio. I did my research about you and Video Game Design Club, but will you tell us a little bit about who you are, what are your hobbies, and anything else you'd like to share with us?
Well, thanks for having me, Sarah. I really appreciate it. So I am a recent graduate of the University of Alabama in Huntsville, December of 2021 to be exact, and I got a bachelor's degree in arts. I focused in on digital animation, and then I got a double minor of computer systems and languages and game design. So every time anyone asks me my degree, I'm always like, okay, all right, do you want the abridged version or do you want like the long version? You know, when I graduated, they did the abridged version, but I like to, sort of talk about all those credentials because there's a lot more sort of nuance to what I studied rather than just art. And that sort of leads into my hobbies. I love games, and that's why the Video Game Design Club was so perfect. When Carl reached out to me and he was like, hey, you've got a really good sort of track record. I see that you'd already been teaching with kids because I also still work another teaching job at a company called IT Tech. He brought me in, we hit it off, and we were able to talk about so many things because like I love games. I've been playing them since I was like a little kid. So we were really just able to build rapport really quickly, and he was able to get a read on me pretty quickly, and that just led to when he had another instructor leave, a guy named TJ, awesome guy. He was not in some of my classes, but I met him in some of my club meetings, so we kind of overlapped there. He used to work with Carl, and so when TJ got a job at a studio, which is, woohoo, we always want that in our line of work because it is kind of a lot to get a studio job. He needed someone to come in and help out, and so that's where I came in.
So, like, you talked about loving video games since day one. What was, like, the first video games did you play? Like, was there Leapfrog? Did you do Leapfrog, Nintendo, Mario Kart? Okay,
so I'm a bit of a hardcore game developer, and that's because I started with hardcore games when I was a little kid. So my papa, he was a great man, but he basically lived in the middle of the woods in Talladega, Alabama, and he loved working on cars. But sometime in around the 80s or 90s, he shifted from working on cars to computers. So he had all of these like incredibly like well-regarded but like old computer RPGs. Not a lot of people know about these games, but they're games like Might and Magic. A lot of people know about the Elder Scrolls, but he had like the old ones from the 90s. All these like crazy old, really hardcore games that were an evolution of pen and paper role-playing games. And he basically, my mom, because my mom obviously loves her dad, because that's the side of the family my papa was from, my mom just started borrowing these games from him. And so when she was pregnant with me, her and my dad played all of these games. And then when I was born, I basically would sit on their lap and watch them play these like really like complicated games, and I just thought they were the coolest thing ever. And so one of the first times I was allowed to play games is my mom would be like running around adventuring or what have you, and she would let me click the mouse button to attack the enemies. And I thought I just...
That's so cute.
Yeah, and ever since then, I have loved games. I have played so many. My library has, I think, 800 of them.
Ooh.
I haven't played most of them at this point. I've played maybe like half, but still, I've played a lot of them.
800 is still a lot of games.
Yeah, the collection's built up over the years for sure. But probably one of the most influential games that I've played was the Elder Scrolls 3 Morrowind. Brilliant game. What made it so enthralling was the developers put a really big emphasis on world building. So they created this world that just literally felt alien, but it also felt really robust and like fleshed out to every degree. They even thought out like where the communities in the game would get their food from, but it all felt so strange, and that just zapped my imagination as a kid. And what's really cool is the guy who did a lot of that world building is an actual UAH graduate.
That's awesome.
Yeah, the only reason I know is because like, a lot of people online fanboy over his work. And I thought, oh, I'll just look him up on LinkedIn. But his name was Michael Kirkbride, and he is a UAH alumni apparently, which I figured the art department would be talking about more.
Yeah, that's something they should be highlighting. That's really cool.
I know, because like the Elder Scrolls has like low key sold so many copies because it's the same series as Skyrim, which is I think Skyrim sold well over 100 million copies.
Ooh.
I don't know if that's an exact sale figure, but like I don't know. I figured the university would be bragging about it more as like a recruiting tool. But yeah, so I love Western games. I love anything that's like derived from Dungeons and Dragons. Those are the kinds of games I want to make, and they influence both my art style and my development style.
Okay, so would you say, is that the biggest part of video games that you love, is the art aspect, or you talked about kind of there was a storyline and how it was intricate and like very intriguing, or would you say the storyline's the cool part, or the coding? What would you say like the favorite aspect that really draws you to video games would be?
It's definitely the worlds and the stories, but I think that the art is very heavily intertwined in that. I think the most powerful tool that games can have is the ability to transport you to another world, and the vision of that world is created by the developers, especially when like the art team and the writing team are working in harmony. It can create an experience that really can't be encapsulated by other forms of media. There are so many experiences that I've had that I just have completely enriched my imagination, and I really, they're not experiences that you would predict from just like looking at a cover, because a lot of game developers put incredibly nuanced ideas into their works. And so by far, that's definitely what it is. But in terms of like what I enjoy working on the most, it's definitely the art side. I can do programming. You kind of have to be able to do programming. But in college, I focused in on art. I loved it so much. It's a really enjoyable process. There's a lot of nuance to art in games as well. It's not just like you're an artist or you're a programmer in the art field alone. And this obviously kind of varies depending on like what level in the food chain you want to work at. So if you're working on like an indie game, you are going to be wearing a lot more hats. But if you're like working at like a big company that's like makes like say Call of Duty, you're basically going to do one thing, and you need to do that better than everyone else on the planet. So like designing textures for environments, designing textures for characters, designing models for characters, doing hair grooming for characters, clothing design. And you'll do that for like 2 years just on like a couple characters, because of how intricate and convoluted the process is and the tools that go into those things. So what's really great about the stuff I've studied, but it's also kind of a double-edged sword, is that the university gave me a really great, well-rounded education, but they didn't really help me specialize in any capacity. So and it's actually one of the reasons why I got hired at ID Tech and Video Game Design Club, is that my general sort of knowledge of everything, I'd say I understand everything in the game development process to at least a 6 or a 7 out of 10. But to get these like studio jobs, they want 9s out of 10. But you don't need to know most things. You only need to know one thing. But to teach people how to make it, you need to understand all of it, So that's kind of what's led me to working in the positions that I am. But I was luckily able to, through the university, find several opportunities to continue my education that I wouldn't have been able to get into if it hadn't been for that general education that I got here.
So you think if you didn't come to UAH, you probably would have never come to the Video Game Design Club or the I2C?
Yeah, no, not at all. I don't think Carl would have even looked at me because Carl reached out to me on LinkedIn. Okay. That's how we met. And I don't think it would have happened if it hadn't been for the portfolio and resume that I'd already been building, which I owe entirely to a guy named Vinny Argentina over at Wilson Hall right next to us.
Okay.
The man is a legend. I owe him so many things. He got me, so I actually have shipped a game title already. And I say shipped, I didn't do that much for it, but he was kind enough to take me under his wing and teach me a bunch of stuff. There's a game studio in Huntsville called Ionized Games. It's run by one guy named Taylor. He's awesome. But my senior year, he kind of took me under his wing, let me work on his game, paid me way more than I deserved for the work that I did for him, and just generally gave me a ton of great insight and experience into what actually working on a game was like. And so I can say that I have a shipped title under my belt now, which is huge. Being in the credits to a game on Steam is something I'd always wanted, but never knew if I was going to get. And that was one of the reasons why Carl reached out to me,
Steam
too.
is the video games that you can get on like PC and Xboxes that has all the games. That's the game running site?
So it's just for
Awesome,
PC.
yeah.
It's just for PC.
Just for PC?
Yeah,
Okay.
because Microsoft doesn't get any money from Steam, so they don't they don't want it on Xbox because, you know, then that would cut into their profits. But that's, pretty much all PC games go through Steam at this point. It doesn't have to, but that gets into the intricacies
That's huge,
of the
though.
marketplace.
Yeah, that's huge.
Yeah, so
awesome.
It was really great. And between that and one other job I worked while I was in college was the reason I have any marketability as a job candidate right now. And you know, the Video Game Design Club has helped with that tremendously as well.
That's awesome. So we talked about Steam. So and you made a game for like the PC and helped with that.
Mm-hmm.
Have you just done PC games? Have you gone out and done like Xbox games?
So it's pretty much just PC because that's what I was raised on. I have played Xbox games. I have played Nintendo games because I had like a GameCube when I was a kid.
Yeah.
But I think if I had to draw like the battle lines in the console wars, where I would be first and foremost, number one is PC. Then I'd probably go PlayStation, just because, well, this has kind of changed recently, but it used to be that you could not get PlayStation games anywhere but PlayStation. Whereas Xbox, even though they do make great games, you can pretty much get all of them on PC. Because Microsoft makes Xbox and Windows. So they don't really segment their platform that heavily, which I'm a huge fan of. But it's never given me a reason to buy an Xbox. With PlayStation, they make some incredible games, and you can only get those on PlayStation. So that's why I've engaged with that ecosystem more than I have with the Xbox console ecosystem.
I'm an Xbox person. I love Xbox. I play Switch, and I do Steam. I love Sims, the house designing game. Yes, and I have Origin on my computer as well.
Nice. The Sims is such a great game. The Sims 3 was one of my favorite games. I played it all the time as a kid.
They had a sale during COVID. It's like a pretty expensive game because it's got so much.
It is.
But it went down to $9.99 during COVID. It's like to get people to stay home.
Yeah.
And I was like, I mean, you have to do it now. And ever since then, I think I've collected over 465 hours on my computer of that.
Oh, my goodness.
Because it counts it.
Yeah.
And I was like, oh, man. It's like I really have to watch myself because I get so sucked into it. There's so many options in Sims.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot of games that are just designed to just suck in your time. And some games get dangerous about it. They literally, I actually think game developers have an ethical responsibility to be mindful of how addictive they make their games. Because some games are literally just weaponized dopamine. They will suck you in and they will keep you hostage. They will put you in a headlock and not let you go. Which you don't have someone spending 2,000 hours on a movie, but you do have that on a game. So it's just, there's a lot of ethics and moral dilemmas that exist in the games industry related to commercialization and monetization. Like with The Sims, for example, I love The Sims, but man, if you were to buy every DLC pack for that game,
you're racking up some money right there.
Yeah, a lot, and I don't know. I'm all for developers making money so that they can be paid well, but I also, there's just a line between nickel and diming your customers that I don't think has really been clearly defined. Because they're in the College of Business, you take business ethic. In the College of Science, you have classes. I had to take a computer science ethics class. Mm-hmm. But game development is the most profitable entertainment industry on the planet. One game alone, like Fortnite, makes, I think, it makes at least $1 billion a year.
Because they sell skins and stuff like that. Yeah.
Microtransactions to little kids. But there's absolutely no ethics class related to game design because the field is so new. So that's something I would love to see, innovated and expanded on, and considered going forward, because it feels like a lot of people, despite how much money the games industry makes, I feel like a lot of people don't consider it as legitimate as other fields like engineering,
Yeah.
And that's not my own sort of personal musings. But nonetheless, there's just so much money involved that I would like to see there be a more sort of foundational education available in regards to game history and the ethics of game development. But I'm sure, especially when I went through it, Vinny was already doing above and beyond what I think you could get from any other college in the state for game development. That's why I came to UAH, is because I originally came here for computer science, right? The computer science classes were really, really hard because my brain would just basically reject the material. So I transitioned to art about 2 years in, And I kept a minor in coding because I do enjoy coding. It's just like I'm abysmal when it comes to syntax. Like I really have to like triple check all the code I write. And so that ignited my brain when I started working on art. And like not just art, but like technical art and stuff too, like character rigging and programming shaders and doing all that kind of stuff and being able to apply it towards an end goal like game development really helped with that. You know, I was able to not only just do well, but excel, especially under Vinny's tutelage and sort of the classes and curriculum that he set up. So, you know, the game development program is amazing and it's doing super good over there. When you graduate in the games industry, you have to fight tooth and nail for a position. And pretty much one of the things I think like that contributes to it is there's just not a big game development scene in Huntsville. That's why I was so grateful to work with Taylor, because he's kind of one of the guys pushing the forefront of the game development scene in Huntsville. There's lots of other people, I'm sure. Like, this is a big city, and I don't claim to know everyone in it. So I'm sure there's a lot of things that I don't know about. There's a lot of the graduates that I've seen pretty much go into government contracting, which is a great line of work. You know what I mean? It pays well. You get to do really cool stuff. But it's not making commercial games. It's not like a game studio that then is like, you know, publishing a trailer and going to E3 and doing the whole 9 yards and like putting it on Steam. But I don't even know how to go about starting something like that up. So it's a lot of these are just kind of my own musings on this. But I just see so much untapped potential. And I think that if, you know, some big fish were to, you know, start sharing that mindset, and funding certain startup initiatives, that we could really see some crazy stuff pop up in the city. But yeah, that's kind of a wild tangent. I didn't mean to get that off.
No, I like it, yes.
But yeah, there's just a lot of sort of musings around the game design club that I've been thinking about. And that's actually one of the reasons why I love the game design club so much, is because, you know, at my other teaching job at ID Tech, it's pretty much just, all right, me and this kid sit down and I teach him this one really hyper-specific thing. But the way Carl's running the club is so much fun because it doesn't focus on like overbearing kids with the incredibly difficult technical specifics of the medium. It's more just basically fun touch and go points each month that kind of cover broad swatches of design. So like one month we did animation and we focused on just teaching the kids the basics of like sort of interpolation driven keyframe animations. And so like we didn't do any sort of fancy effects. We just had basically this program on Steam that was like a game that was just designed to teach one, not simple, but not overly complex part of animation only. And so they would come in and they could basically pick any day of the month, at least during the week through Tuesday through Thursday. Yeah. They would come in for 3 sessions and we would work with them there. And if they met our learning requirements, they'd get a badge. And the badge idea is so great. I love that too, because it really...
Kids love that. They love that.
It gives them something to be proud of, you know?
Yes.
And so just the way that the club is set up is, one, incredibly refreshing for me to teach compared to just like, all right, let's sit down and let's go through the hotkeys for Blender, which is what I do with ID Tech. Versus like, all right, we're going to have this like really wide range of like really interesting learning goals. And we are going to kind of help you hit those points however you'd like. It's a lot more freeform. It's a lot more energetic. It's a lot more fun. And it's really just been a wonderful experience so far. And I'm very grateful that Carl brought me on. So
yeah, we did have a podcast with Carl in the Video Game Design Club, and he told us a little bit about what it was. Can you just give the people who haven't listened, but y'all really should go listen to it. Mm-hmm. So a little bit of blurb, but just like 1 or 2 sentences of what the Video Game Design Club is. What are the events you're hosting, anything like that?
So and my take is probably going to differ a little bit from Carl's, but the Video Game Design Club is basically a low-stakes, high-energy way to introduce kids to the fundamentals of game development. And it's not a school, it's a club. And there's a big like sort of emphasis on that because like the thing I mentioned, ID Tech, that's more of a school. I am their instructor. Here, I guess I kind of take more of a mentorship role. So I'm not standing over them and going, you got to do this. You know, I'm helping them explore their interest in game development and using my experience to help sort of steer that exploration. But a lot of it is intrinsically driven, which I've found tends to, one, make the kids less stressed and overworked, because it's a 2-hour block, you know, so they come in and they got a lot of time ahead of them in that sort of class. But two, it just also creates like a really fun atmosphere because they aren't students, they're members, you know? And so that sort of changes how I have to view them and how I help them. And so we'll have the sort of the way the class is structured is the first hour. It's like, all right, let's work on the things that we have planned for you this month. But then the second hour, if you're really enjoying it, you can keep on chugging. But you can also choose to explore your own interest related to game design. So like last month, Carl set up one kid with just this entire like game development like boot camp because he was really excelling in some of the things that we'd been learning. And so he was doing this really cool sort of basically little mini track of like learning how to do a 2D game engine in his free time. And we just basically gave him the tools and the environment to explore that interest. But another member was exploring character design, and they were drawing their own original characters in the second hour. And that's coupled with the fact that we know we're giving them a good sort of foundational understanding of whatever fundamental we're exploring that month. So like this month we're doing dungeon design, and that is something I excel in, let me tell you, because you know I love RPGs and games like that. So it's been incredibly fun to like basically bring these kids in, explain to them not just how Zelda works, but like the psychology behind how we design the dungeons and games like that. You know, sort of emphasizing points of not just, oh, you know, dungeons aren't just enemies like sort of crammed into these like square rooms that you run between. They're like this sort of like hierarchy of interlocking puzzles that like when you go into a room, there may be an obstacle that you can't overcome. So you have to go explore down a side path, find an object to let you overcome that obstacle and then loop back around to it. And to get them thinking in sort of that perspective, because there's a lot of things in games that you don't notice until you start learning how to make them. Game developers do a lot of very interesting under the hood psychological tricks to get you playing by the rules that they set up in their little sandbox. And that's sort of what we've been emphasizing this month. So we've been having the kids do paper mapping and then building the game that they map out on paper in a dungeon designing kit. And they've been loving it. It's been so cool to see some of the things that they've made. And so, you know, I'm sure this is a little bit of another winding tangent, but the Game Design Club, if I were to sort of wrap up everything I just said in one succinct statement, it is just a place to explore kids' passion for games.
And, like, it's very educational, and a lot of people will get that confused with just saying video games are bad, don't put your kids behind the TV screen. How do you kind of differ from that? Like, show them, like, it is an educational, you are learning from it, you're gaining, letting kids explore their passions. How do you stay away from the traditional, it's just they're playing video games, it's bad? Well,
I actually, you know, it used to be when I was a kid, I'd be like, oh, there's nothing wrong with games. Game addiction isn't real. You know, there's like, how dare you say that kids shouldn't be playing games all the time? But like, I actually think that there is some merit to that argument, especially in this day and age. Like, games are addictive. They are. And I think that it is a parent's job to sort of not restrict it entirely, but to sort of measure it like you would measure time on a phone. Phone games especially I find to be like fairly vapid and mindless, which is a very harsh like way to describe that, but a lot of mobile games just don't offer anything meaningful or substantial, because they're pretty much just designed to suck money out of the parents' wallet through the kids. And there are exceptions to this. There are some fantastic mobile games, but just you know, a penny for a pound, the average mobile game is not going to be a sort of thoughtful, holistic experience. But I'd have to say that in defense of game development, there are so many rich experiences that allow kids to explore their creativity and their passions and to experience stories that you wouldn't get through movies or books, because they grant that participant to be the active driver of the story rather than just a passive observer, which for me, I owe so much to my parents for letting me explore my imagination and my passions through video games, because you get so many stories that like just wouldn't be considered safe or marketable from a commercial perspective for movies or books that you get in games that are just incredibly enthralling. And especially when you get older and you're able to engage in more mature content, there are some games that are legitimately brilliant and serve not only as great pieces of entertainment, but as fantastic grounds for the exploration of pretty deep ideas. And so I'd say that you have to just know where to look, but that's easier said than done because the market is so overfilled with games at this point. So, I think just doing a lot of research but you could do that with any medium, like a parent could curate an extensive catalog of books for their kid to read that are thoughtful and fulfilling, just like with movies, you know what I mean? Or with music. There are sort of quote unquote cream of the crop for each of these mediums that can be curated and given to a kid to sort of improve their tastes and help them develop a more well-rounded understanding of not only their personal interests, but the world. And I think the same thing exists for games. You just have to know where to look,
Yeah. Do you have any advice for students who have passion for video games or passions for art, but they're not sure they want to go in that route in the workforce?
So I'd say my advice, there's a couple things. One, you need to decide sooner rather than later if you want to go for it, because if you do, you got to commit. You have to commit it, and you have to live and breathe game design. Because I'm nearing some really great studio and remote opportunities, which I'm searching for remote opportunities because I want to keep working at the game design club while also working at a studio because I enjoy it so much. But I would consider myself overqualified because I have a bachelor's with above a 3.0 GPA and 2 years of work experience already in my line of work. And I've applied for over 150 jobs, and I've only gotten, I think, 20 interviews, and then I've gotten ghosted by all of those interviewers because it's brutal out there. The games industry is such an inhospitable environment for junior developers because a lot of these places will be like, all right, we want 2 years experience in a ship AAA title, and it's like, how do you get that if you haven't worked a junior position? So you need to figure out if you want to commit to this sooner rather than later, and then you need to come up with an attack plan. So for example, mine, I want to be a artist, but you need to specialize if you want to work at a sort of a studio that comes with things like a good paycheck that's not dependent on game sales, and that has things like medical and dental. So I specialized in environment art. And the university wasn't able to take me up to AAA standards for that, unfortunately. So I found I call it my equivalent of a master's degree, because there isn't a master's degree for game development, but I felt like I needed to go further with my education. So I found this thing called Vertex School. And it's taught by literally just senior artists at these studios. So people who are artists at Bethesda, Blizzard, EA, Activision, all like Treyarch.
Some big names.
CD Projekt Red, all of these huge studios. And I've been studying under a guy named Jacob Clausen, he was a lead environment artist at Ubisoft. And now he's a lead artist at just this kind of startup studio. We meet once a week for 5 hours, and he basically says, here is how we make games. This is cutting edge, I'm using this in my job right now as a big fish in the food chain. And you now are going to practice what I taught you for 40 hours a week. And that is the amount of work that I'm having to do to become a viable candidate for a AAA job position. So the bachelor's degree is great. That's going to get you noticed. But then you actually have to have the work portfolio to go that extra distance. So if you're going to be a coder, just get a computer science degree. That's that'll do it. Play games, understand games, but get a computer science degree and know your stuff. And you should be good there. But if you want to go art, if you want to go game design,
you have to have the experience.
You have to have the experience. You have to have the portfolio. Because, unfortunately, there just aren't a lot of degrees that are as valid and impactful, I think, because of that previously thing we talked about earlier with just general departments not being funded as well, because this isn't just a UAH exclusive thing where the game department is undervalued. It's a national
arts,
thing.
Yes.
Yeah. UAH is the reason I came here, like I said, is because our art department is penny for a pound better than most other average universities in Alabama, not counting specialized schools like SCAD. Because the education I got here is going to be better than pretty much anywhere else I could get in Alabama. But still, the games industry is so hyper competitive and so specialized that pretty much workforce training is the only thing to look at. And I can't believe this, but when I applied for a lot of these jobs, for art specifically, environment art, they don't look for a bachelor's degree. They look for a portfolio. Now, the bachelor's degree helps 100%. If it came down to me and someone else who were both equally like qualified with a good portfolio,
but you had the bachelor's and he didn't,
I would get it.
Yeah.
But you know, I'm still working on getting my skills up, and like I can make photorealistic stuff, but they want to see such breadth or not breadth. They want to see such like quality. So what my mentor told me is you basically need 2 portfolio pieces, but they need to be so good that when the hiring manager sees it, they go, "We need them." And so that's sort of what I'm working on curating right now, but that takes time. And that's another reason why the Game Design Club is so wonderful, is because it provides people like me who are still making that final climb to the peak of the mountain a way to work and gain experience in a way that's not just fun, but actually relevant to what I'm studying, because I'm able to take the things that I'm learning from my mentors and that I learned in all my classes at UAH, which I'd like to add, the only reason I was able to get into this mentorship because they actually do a portfolio review and an interview before they let you into this Vertex School was because of UAH. So that's another thing too. You can't just kind of roll into these high-level mentorship / fellowship things, because you need to have some sort of fundamental knowledge already, and UAH enabled that. So I'm super grateful to that. It's been a much harder ascent than I thought, but it's also because I'm trying to go for the big jobs.
Yeah.
Like there are some jobs in Huntsville that I've applied for, but like I'm trying to go to Poland.
How bougie.
Yeah, I know, because there's a studio out there that worked on a game called Cyberpunk, and that they made the Witcher games, and I really want to work for them. And one of the principal character artists already followed me on Instagram, which was a big moment because it meant I was starting to get noticed. And so I think I've got an in route there, but I just have to finish out my portfolio. But that's like the ultimate goal. But like it's so ridiculously hard to get. It's like it'd be like trying to like get into Harvard, it feels like, but as like an average high school student. So, you know, that's sort of the attack plan. But I know that's a very long, sort of winded and rambling response to the question of what I would recommend my fellow game developers do.
Did you know it was very challenging and very competition heavy when you first decided to do this major, or was it more realized when you got into it?
No, I knew from the get-go. That's actually why I came for computer science, because everyone told me like, oh yeah, you're probably not going to make good money making video games, which isn't true. Game development pays incredibly well
if you can get the job.
If you can get the job, exactly. But that's why I went computer science originally, because, you know, I still found it an interesting field. The computer science department here is amazing. Like, it's such an incredibly, like, robust and, like, prestigious computer science department. Because my first job on campus is I was an assistant to the assistant director of outreach for the university. So I would go to the Space and Rocket Center and talk about the university. So I have a bunch of UAH facts bouncing around in my head. But, like, I just realized that it wasn't what I wanted to be doing. And so I swapped majors, and I was just like, all right, you know, I'm picking the hard route, but if I'm going to do it, I got to fully commit. And so I have basically worked on as many things as I can outside of class, which was very tiring. But it's led me to a point now where I'm a viable candidate. I'm just qualified enough to the point where I have to find someone who's willing to take a chance on me, and Carl was, and it's been paying off in spades for him. So, but there's so many people like me, you know what I mean, that just weren't lucky enough to have something fall on their desk, and but I know could do just as good work as I can, because there's so many skilled people in the art department. I don't know. I just wish there was like some big old studio that would just come to Huntsville and be like, we're going to hire all of you. Come on, guys. And like, but that's like kind of a pipe dream, you know?
Yeah.
But someone has to make that a reality. So, you know, like,
hey, you could come get a spot here up in the I2C.
Yeah. I mean, I would love to do something like that, and I definitely know how to run a studio, and I've got ideas. Me and Carl even spitballed it at one point, but I've got to finish my mentorship first and foremost. You know what I mean? Yeah. Because I'm still not done with school. Because I like I said, I graduated in December, and that was one of the proudest moments of my life. But then I rolled right back into basically a master's / workforce training program. So still got homework, still got a Canvas page I got to check.
Yeah, I thought about going back for my master's, but I wouldn't do it till the fall. I'm going to take a semester off.
Smart. Yeah, decompress a little bit. Enjoy that adult life, because it has been... I'd be lying if I said Vertex School was like UAH. It is markedly less stressful because you don't get graded on anything. It's just if you don't do the work, you're not going to get that job. So you still got to do the work. But I have been able to enjoy the graduate life a little bit, and it's been very fun.
I'm jealous. I'm jealous.
You'll get there. You're almost there.
I'm close.
You've got it.
But would you change anything from your past to now?
I'm really kind of debating on how honest I should be here. But like, if I were to be hyper efficient, if I wanted to be an artist, I probably wouldn't have even come to UAH, which is crazy because like I'm so glad that I graduated from here, and it's weird. I wouldn't change it, but like at the same time, if I was trying to be hyper efficient, I would have just got on YouTube, done a bunch of work by myself, and then applied for Vertex School and gone that route, and they would have had me job ready in 9 months. I honestly think that a lot of these game development jobs could be treated as trade school jobs.
Okay.
Especially for things like tech arts and art, and like 3D modeling, because you basically need to do one thing and you need to do it really, really well. Whereas And again, I don't really study like education theory, so I probably don't really know what I'm talking about here, but it seems like bachelor's degrees are designed to get you more well-rounded and get you that really sort of robust foundation and then help you specialize on something. But like with a bachelor's degree, like you can work the job that's related to your major, or you could work any other number of jobs because you have that like underlying like foundation of like the sciences.
They just want the degree.
And the maths. Yes, you know? But like it's the opposite problem with game development. So I feel like, you know, workforce training is as viable an option. And so if I was trying to save time and money, I probably would have just done that. But at the same time, I'm glad I didn't, because I got so many experiences here at UAH and met so many people.
Never come to the I2C? You never got the video game design club?
Yes. So, like, I still wouldn't have changed it, but if we're talking, like, pure efficiency, like, does that make sense?
Yes, I totally understand. I wouldn't have switched majors 3 times.
Yeah, it's things like that. Yeah.
That's extra classes that I don't even get to use.
Mm-hmm. I would have been more careful about my foreign languages, because my last semester I had to take Spanish 101, which was the hardest class I've ever taken, just because of my learning challenges. Because it was all just memorization. But like my professor, she was the nicest lady ever. She worked with me, and I owe my graduation to her. So, you know, but I would have been smarter about the classes I'd taken, because I tried to avoid taking a foreign language because I needed a foreign language credit. And so I took like a foreign film credit, which was technically a WLC credit, but it didn't count. So, you know, things like that.
Yeah.
You know, I was trying to like get around the requirements, and I should have just, you know, bit the bullet and did it much earlier. Lots of things like that. You know, there are thousands of little changes that I'm sure you could make along the way, but in a way you also learn from those experiences, and they make you
and everything worked out. Like I said, you got the game design club. Yeah, everything works out.
Yeah, you know, it's been a fun ride so far. I definitely, you know, there are things I'd revise, but I'm pretty happy with how things have turned out so far.
That's awesome. Look, I think we're wrapping up on time. I've loved this conversation. This is probably my top favorite conversation.
Really?
Yeah, I literally love video games. But I really thank you for being in the Spark Studio and showing awareness towards video games. You really opened my eyes on a lot of that stuff, especially when you talked about how video game design, people have like the ethical and unethical things about keeping people locked into the video games. That was something that really opened my eye. So thank you for coming on the studio.
Of course. Well, thank you for having me. It's been a joy. This is my first ever time being on a podcast, and it was an incredible experience.
I'm glad. Thank you.
Of course, thank you too.
Thank you again, Ryan, for another great episode of Community Chat. Make sure you stay connected with us by following us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube at UAH I2C. Bye, everyone. Onward and upward.